This is going to be section 4.3, and you're going to find I'm going to do this a whole lot different than what the book does. I do not think they did a very good job of organizing this. So, first thing that you need to know about this section, there are non-standard, it's actually titled wrong, it's non-standard and minimization problems. And first, we are not going to do the non-standard ones. I just don't see any sense in doing it. It's going to confuse you more than anything else. So if you are reading in the book, then keep in mind we are not going to do those. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to minimize the problem. In 4.2, we were talking about maximizing, and okay, so you understand that pretty good, and we're going to do minimizing. So you maximize profits, you minimize costs, and that's where we're going to approach it. So I've created an example, and I think this is going to be better for you to follow on minimizing problems. So I'm going to do this. We'll see what happens. Here's the thing you got to remember. Almost all the rules are the same that you did for maximization, except there's two wrinkles, one at the beginning and one at the end. So we're going to come up with an initial tableau. But it's not going to be a whole one. We're just going to put in certain numbers. Okay, so just like maximization, I got a 5, I got a 1, I got a 5, I got a 3. And somewhere over here there's going to be a 5. And somewhere over here there's going to be a 10. And from the cost function, I would put a -4 here and a -2. Okay, and that's all the farther we're going with that. Okay. Now we're going to come up with a final. Tableau. I call these tableaus, and the other ones I actually call matrices. Okay, so what we want to do is we're going to flip them. Just imagine a line. That main diagonal, we've talked about that before. Just imagine the main diagonal going right down through the middle, and I'm going to flip everything. So the rows, so I see a 5, 1, and a 5 in the first row. That becomes the first column. So I'll put the 5 here. The 1 who was there is now over here. And that 5 comes down here. Okay, now here's where it's tricky. Don't ask me to explain why. You don't want to know. But it was positive here, and when you bring it down here, it's negative. Just think of that's where the negatives are, right, when you do this method. My second row here, 5, 3, 10, becomes the second column. And that 10 would be negative. And then just like I did there, somewhere over here, I've got the 4 and the 2. Now it's negative here, so when I flip it, that becomes positive. So what happened? The positives here became negatives when I brought them on the bottom, and the negatives that were on the bottom, they become positive up here. So I just flipped it. The rows became the columns. So that's the first wrinkle. I told you there's a wrinkle at the beginning and one at the end. Okay, so that wrinkle helps you set up what the matrix is going to look like. So I've got 5, 5, 1, 3, -5, -10, and then all this stuff in here needs to be filled in. Well, just like what we did for the maximization problems, this is that identity. So it's 3 rows, so it's going to be a 3 by 3 identity. 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1. My 4 is here, my 2 here, as in this number is always 0. Okay, I'm grabbing another piece of paper here. I'll use this one because it's got lines. Let's go the other way. Okay, so what we want to do is find the biggest negative. Biggest negative's right here. So here's my pivot column. It's the same thing we did last section. Once we get this, same thing. Over here, my ratios, I'm going to have 4 over 5. And this is going to be 2 over 3. And that one's not going to matter because it's 0. Okay, we want the smallest. You know, if it helps you at this point, you could think of that as being 0.80, and that's about 0.67. So the smallest positive is the 0.67. So this becomes my pivot row. Okay, so we go down here. Top row stays the same. 5, 5, 1, 0, 0, 4. The second row, I've got to make that a 1, so I'm going to take 1/3, row 2. So 1/3 of 1 is 1/3. 1/3 of 3 is 1. I knew that. That's my pivot. 1/3 of 0 is 0. 1/3 of 1 is 1/3. 1/3 of 0 is 0. And 1/3 of 2 is 2/3. That gives me the 1. Bottom row stays the same. It's the same principle. You get a 1, you get some zeros. Okay, now what? Now that I have a 1, I've got to get a 0 up here. So I'm going to take -5 times row 2. I'm going to add it to row 1. That's -5/3. Think of that as 15 over 3. 15 over 3, same thing as 5. So 15 and -5 we give you 10 over 3. -5 times 1 is -5, plus +5 is 0. -5 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. -5 times 1/3 is -5/3, plus 0 is -5/3. -5 times 0 is 0, plus 0 is 0. And -5 times 2/3 is -10/3. 4, that's like 12 over 3. So you got a 12 and a -10. 12 and -10 is going to give you 2 over 3. Second row had the 1 in it, so it stays the same. And then we go to the bottom. To get a 0 here, we're going to take 10 times row 2 plus row 3. So 10 times 1/3, that's going to be 10/3. Think of that as -15 over 3. So I got 10 and -15 is -5/3. If you know what you're doing, your heart just skipped a beat because now you know you're going to have to go through another iteration by getting a negative on the bottom. 10 times 1 is 10, plus -10 is 0. 0 and 0 is 0. 10 times 1/3, that's 10/3. And that was a 0 down there. So 10/3 plus 0 is 10/3. 0 and 1 is 1. And then 10 times 2 is 20. 20 over 3 plus 0. 20 over 3. Okay, we got a negative on the bottom, so we got to keep going. Biggest negative. So this becomes my pivot column. When you go over here, you got 2/3 divided by 10/3. The 3's drop out. That's 2 over 10. Let's think of that as 1 over 5. 2/3 divided by 1/3 is 2. And then we don't look at the bottom. That's going to be negative. So the smallest positive is going to be 1/5. So the top row becomes my pivot row. So we got to get a 1 there, so we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, so that's 3 over 10 times row 1. 3 over 10 times 10 over 3 is 1. 3 over 10 times 0 is 0. 3 over 10 times 1 is 3 over 10. 3 over 10 times 5 over 3, the 3's drop out. 5 over 10 is a half, that's negative 1/2. 3 over 10 times 0 is 0. And 3 over 10 times 2 over 3, the 3's drop out. 2 over 10, 1/5. Should be the same thing as I had up there. Okay, row 2 stays the same, so I'm simply going to copy those numbers down here. Same thing with the bottom row. It's a 0. Okay, this should be the last step. Top row's got the 1, so it'll stay the same. Yep. 1 over 5. Okay, to get a 0 here, we're going to multiply by negative 1/3 times row 1 plus row 2. So negative 1/3 times 1 is negative 1/3 plus 1/3 is 0. Negative 1/3 times 0 is 0 plus 1 is 1. Negative 1/3 times 3/10. The 3's drop out. I got negative 1 over 10 plus 0 is negative 1 over 10. Negative 1/3 times negative 1/2. That's 1/6 plus 1/3. 1/6 plus 1/3. That's 1/6. Think of that as 2/6. 1/6 and 2/6 is 3/6, which is a half. If you have trouble getting that, just take a piece of paper, go off the side. Should get it. 0 plus 0 is going to be 0. And then negative 1/3 times 1/5. That's going to be negative 1/15. We need to write that as something over 15. So that's going to be 10 over 15. So I got negative 1 plus 10. Negative 1 plus 10 is 9. 9 over 15. And the lowest terms is 3/5. And now the bottom row. Get a 0 here. We're going to multiply 5/3 times row 1. Add it to row 3. So 5/3 times 1 is 5/3 plus negative 5/3 is 0. 0 plus 0 is 0. 5/3 times 3/10. The 3's drop out. 5 over 10 is a half. A half plus 1 is going to be 1/2. Okay. Now the next one's going to be a little bit tougher. Let me get a piece of paper and I'll do this one. So I've got to take 5/3 times the top number. The top number was negative 1/2 plus the bottom number, which is 10/3. So that's negative 5 over 6 plus, get a common denominator, 6. That's got to be 20. 15 over 6. In lowest terms, that's going to be 5 over 2. That's what I put right here, 5 over 2. Okay, let's move this up a little bit. Okay, so now you got 5/3 times 0, 0 plus 1 is 1. And then 5/3 times 1/5. The 5's drop out, that's 1/3. 1/3 plus 0. Something happened. I didn't copy that right. That was 20 over 3. So let's go back and do it again. So I got 5/3 times 1/5. 5's drop out. That gives you 1 1/3 plus 20 over 3. So 1 over 3 plus 20 over 3. 1 plus 20 is 21. 21 over 3 is 7. Okay, all the hard work is done. Now we got to come up with our answers. So my minimization, or my minima, I should say, my minimum cost, in this case is 7. It's always lower right-hand corner, just like what we did for maxes. Okay, now it's going to be a little different. We got x and y. So we got to know what x is, and we got to know what y is. Before we found x and y over here on the right, but here's the next twist. Remember how I flipped things at the beginning to get going? Now I'm kind of flipping back. So instead of finding x and y over here, I'm going to find it down here. That 1 means 1 cost gives you 7. So right here, those two numbers are x and y. X equals 1/2, y equals 5/2. So order pair, 1/2, comma, 5/2. So your answers are down here. Always remember on the bottom, you're going to have that 1. That 1 is connected to the 7. That means 1 cost equals 7. The numbers to the left of the 1 would represent x and y. X is here, y is here. If you had a problem that had x, y, and z, x would have been this number, y would have been that one, and z would have been that one. We'll hit that again, but that gives you a good idea. That's how you minimize a normal minimization problem. And I'm going to stop there.